I'm almost embarrassed to discuss this. In 8 decades of living, I had never been to a chamber music concert. Not once. No string quartet, no piano recital, no intimate evening of serious music performed in a hushed hall by people who know exactly when to clap and when absolutely not to. Saying that makes me wince a little. But then again, this wouldn't be the first time I've wandered into unfamiliar territory late in life. Not long ago, I wrote about being wildly out of my element at the Denver Stock Show. Different boots, different hats, different language. This experience felt similar, except instead of livestock, leather, and auctioneers, it was velvet seats, polished wood, and a silence so complete you could feel it pressing gently against your chest. Last night, I attended my first ever chamber music concert. It was an eye-opener, an out-of-body experience, a reminder, once again, that entire worlds exist just beyond the edges of our routines, patiently waiting for us to stumble into them. The concert took place at the Gates Concert Hall, part of the Newman Center for the Performing Arts on the University of Denver campus. The facility itself is stunning, warm, intimate, beautifully designed, with acoustics that seem to lean toward the performer. What struck me immediately, though, wasn't just the beauty of the hall. It was the crowd. The place was almost completely full. That alone stopped me short. People had come, lots of them, to hear a single person play the piano for more than 2 hours. No visuals, no movement, no screens, just a pianist, a piano, and music. I found that astonishing. Then there was the stillness. I don't think I've ever been in a public space that quiet for that long. You truly could have heard a pin drop. No whispering, no shifting, no phones, no one getting up and leaving. The audience didn't just listen, they committed. For someone like me, with ADHD and a restless mind, sitting quietly and motionless for 2 hours is not exactly my natural state. This wasn't background music. This demanded attention. Chamber music doesn't just ask you to listen. It asks you to behave differently, to slow down, to settle, to stay. And remarkably, the room did. The performer was Zlata Hocheva, a pianist of extraordinary talent. Born in Russia, now living in Berlin, she first appeared on stage at age 4 and made her orchestral debut at 7. Her resume is long and impressive, but what mattered most in the moment was her presence. Calm, focused, completely at ease. She didn't perform at the audience. She seemed to invite us into something deeply personal and deeply practiced. The music itself spanned centuries. She played works by Bartók, Beethoven, Schumann, Bach, Sibelius, Scriabin, and Liszt. As I listened, I became increasingly aware of the vast sweep of time represented in that program. Bach, writing in the early 1700s. Beethoven, straddling the late 1700s and early 1800s. Schumann and Liszt, composing in the mid-1800s. Bartók, Sibelius, and Scriabin, working into the early 1900s. I was listening to music created hundreds of years ago. Music that has survived wars, revolutions, technological upheaval, and cultural shifts. And here it was, alive and resonant in a quiet hall in Denver in 2026. That alone felt humbling. But even beyond the music, I found myself delighted and slightly overwhelmed by the language surrounding it. The program notes introduced me to an entirely new vocabulary. Phrases like suggesting a departure from the sonata structure, droplets in the midst of a reverie, and deceptive melodic simplicity. References to four-square phrasing, tonal relationships, and harmonically adventuresome passages. There were words and terms I'd rarely encountered, if ever. Mazurkas, preludes, etudes, nocturnes, salon pieces, chromaticism, ternary form, cross rhythms, arpeggios, scherzos, diminished sevenths, sudden unexpected modulations, descending tritones. I didn't understand most of it, and yet I loved that it existed. It reminded me of my ongoing fascination with learning new words, how expanding our vocabulary expands the way we see the world. I didn't need to master the language to appreciate that it carried meaning, history, and precision. It was enough to be introduced. At some point during the evening, I began to grasp what chamber music is really about. Historically, most middle-class homes in the 19th century had a piano. Chamber music wasn't designed for massive concert halls or grand spectacles. It was meant to bring the richness of orchestral music into drawing rooms and parlors, to make it intimate, personal, and shared. Big music made small. Music designed not to overwhelm, but to sit with you. By the end of the evening, I hadn't suddenly become knowledgeable about chamber music. I still couldn't explain most of the terminology. I certainly couldn't tell you which passages were technically most demanding, but something had shifted. I felt calmer, more attentive, more present. I had spent 2 hours doing something increasingly rare, listening deeply, without distraction, to something created long before me and performed with extraordinary care. At 80, I'm still discovering rooms I didn't know existed. Last night, I walked into one of them, and that feels like a very good thing.